Well, hello and welcome back to the Odds Now YouTube channel for episode 3 of our brand new betting podcast here on Odds Now. It's called Bettor Days Ahead. It's presented by yours truly, Matt Hill, and my co-host Felix Morson-Pate. Felix, we're back here filming it on Monday. We had a Sunday filming last week. Glad to say we're not interrupting any notable sport right now by this filming, but has been slightly delayed. I've had a bit of a stinker of a weekend, to be honest. My kids and my missus have both had a sickness bug. I'm the only one in the house that managed to have dodged it so far, and I feel like I'm just sat on death row waiting for my turn. But we soldier on, and hopefully that time will never come. But before I ask you how your punting week has gone, how are you generally? I hope you're doing a bit better than my house.
Yeah, there's no sickness bug going around where I am, but I'm hoping that doesn't come soon. No, it's been a busy week. Never stops, does it? The football season. Just had cup weekend and then straight into it. Yet another UEFA midweek this week, so nice and busy.
Oh,
Pricing and
God.
trading all those up. But apart from that, no, it's the sun's starting to come back. Summer's on the horizon, or spring and then summer. We've had darts. We've got tennis coming up with Masters 1000. What more can you want?
Yeah, a bit of everything going on, isn't there? It's a busy time in the sporting calendar. I always think this little period here, as we get into March, Cheltenham on the horizon as well for racing fans as well. So there's plenty to get stuck into. Never stops, as you say. Well, my betting week, I suppose to kick us off, I'll kick us off with a really, really big update. This is an exclusive update. I've been told yesterday that I'm getting paid. I'm getting paid for my bet, which anyone who's listened to the first 2 shows might be partly invested
You
in.
up to Jean.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster. So I was told by the bookmaker in question, who I'm not going to name now that they've come round. I was going to name and shame, but no need for that. I was told originally when I submitted all of my evidence that nothing would be changing. And then when I replied saying I thought that was baffling given the evidence provided and I needed a reference number for IBAS, a day later, I got an email saying that actually they've looked again and it is going to be a winner, which left me feeling a mixture of emotions, to be honest. Great that I'm going to get paid out, as I should. But for the man on the street, how many people are willing to take it and push it this far? And how often is that happening? And we're talking about doing an episode down the line about the difficulties of getting on and getting paid. And we had a question underneath last week's show, which we'll tackle at the end of the show on that very subject. But it did sadden me a little bit that you have to work that hard to get a genuine winner paid out and threaten like effectively legal action from IBAS. So yeah, mixed feelings, but I've not been to collect yet. It was in shop. I've not been to collect. I'm sure the lady behind the till will be delighted to pay me out my winnings, and I'll gleefully take them off them. This week's been a little bit more mixed actually. So if I include that win, I'm obviously well ahead, but I'm going to count that as a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, I'm probably running very close to break even. Unfortunately, I had a good start on the dart at the UK Open, but as I was just telling you off camera, my outrights got absolutely shot to bits at the last 32 stage. I got my main 4 guys in the last 32. Sat himself down for the draw, thinking let's just avoid the big guns here. Ryan Searle gets Humphreys, gets scrubbed. Jermaine Watamina gets Littler, who obviously had scar tissue from the Grand Slam when he got a Tonkin, and he got another one, unfortunately. And then Damon Hector and Connor Scott got each other. Damon Hector gets through that. He's my last man standing, and he loses an absolute classic to Jan van Veen 10-9, despite hitting 90% of his doubles, 9 out of 10 on the outer ring, and he loses. So my main battle for the rest of the UK Open was trying not to give back some of those winnings that I did earn. We had a nice winner on round 1. I take no pleasure in it, mind, but Simon Stevenson to beat Jules Van Dongen 6-0. Van Dongen, as flagged on our preview on the channel here, badly struggling with dartitis. I was really sad to watch, to be honest. He was crying during the game. It was really not good to see, but I couldn't believe the quarter of 7-8 to 1 about the 6-0 correct score there, and it did canter in. I don't think he had a double, bless him. So it really was a bit of a rick, that one. I had a good, as I always say with darts tournaments, had a good start, and then it's a battle for me not to give it back, because as the players get more and more exposed and the markets get more and more accurate, I'm tempted to have a dabble, but really, I could count on one hand the amount of tournaments where I've finished better than I've started. Like the first early days and early rounds of the tournaments are where I tend to make my money, and I've learned that lesson over the years. And now it's just a case of reining myself in. In terms of other sports, didn't have a lot of football action over the weekend compared to a normal weekend because of the illness sweeping through my house. So that was maybe a good or a bad thing. We'll never know. But I did have a a runner in the snooker, a bit of a bad beat. Yu Long, I had him to win his quarter, and I had him outright at quite nice prices. He was 4-2 up in the race to 5 against John Higgins in the quarterfinal. You know the rest. Was 5-4, and John Higgins won the tournament. Congratulations to him. A little bit of a mixed week, but we got paid on the big bet. That's the main takeaway from this week for me. Felix, how's your week been? I know you were saying last week a lot of Continental Cup action on your radar. Was that good, bad, indifferent?
Yeah, it was okay. I had Arminia Bielefeld double chance, and they promptly went and beat Werder Bremen, so that was a nice result. I had Leipzig to beat Wolfsburg, which is a nice result there as well. Cannes against Guingamp in the all second division quarter final, which the French Cup and the German Cup really are quite strange compared to the FA Cup. We've got one championship second division side in the FA Cup out of 8 this year in the quarterfinals. You've got 2 League 2 sides, second division, in the semi-finals of the French Cup, and a third division side in the DFB Pokal in Germany. So,
am I right in saying? I mean, this is just a casual observation. I never really get stuck into those tournaments too much, but it feels like France, that is a really recurring theme. I feel like over the years, I've read so many stories about like a pub team in the quarterfinals, or
you've had
third,
a
fourth,
third division
fifth
side in the final twice this century.
That's crazy, isn't
it? The top teams
crazy.
don't treat it seriously enough. And if you see some of the away days these sides have to do, because the French still have so many colonial territories around the world. You have African and Pacific Island sides playing, which is fantastic. But Dunkirk to beat Lille, and then to come from 2-0 down to beat Brest, beating back-to-back Champions League sides. That's probably the story of the tournament. It's a strange one. I think it's definitely a good one for bettors. Unfortunately, the Spanish Cup didn't go as well. The semi-finals, I was on Atleti and Sociedad in some capacity, and unfortunately, the El Clasico sides were against me there.
I did back Sociedad, draw no bet. Partly, you nudged me towards it. I quite like getting against Real Madrid, because I don't really rate them as the sum of their parts, to be honest.
No, but they always find a way.
Yeah, they do. They
didn't play well. It was a pretty drab game after Madrid won.
You'd be a poor man trying to get Madrid beat all the time. A little bit like trying to get Littler beat in the darts, to be honest. Even if you think there's a way of doing it, although he's probably a little bit more reliable, it must be said, than Real Madrid. But so all in all, though.
And then the FA Cup as well. Preston and over 2.5 goals.
Wow.
That was
love
probably
to know the logic
weekend
for that one. It's a great winner.
Some big prices. I thought that. I've just been sensing that Burnley games are going to start to go over very soon. The spell that Scott Parker's cast over James Trafford and co, especially with Trafford not playing in that game as well.
Well, that was it. And I seem to remember Preston scored a great free kick as well, which I'm not saying Trafford would have saved it, but you do wonder when there's a change of keeper and there's a set piece goal, whether the rustiness plays a part, don't you?
And then outside of football, viewers from the first episode remember we have a group accumulator, me and a few friends every weekend in the football, where we branched out and we did a UK Open Friday afternoon session one. And lo and behold, despite not winning a football one yet this season, we got a 20-1 darts winner 7-fold, which is very nice. The football then went absolutely terribly on the Saturday, but we didn't care. We could collect after the Friday. That was very nice, including your excellent tip of Scott Williams over Vessel Nyman. That made its way into our 7-fold there. Other sports, not too much. It's been a pretty quiet weekend. Not a lot on the tennis, a little bit on the golf. Shane Lowry got an each-way place for me.
That's all right. A place on the golf is normally enough to kind of recoup things, isn't it?
Yeah, just about broke even on the golf, and looking ahead to UEFA midweek, like I say, and the sunshine swing in the tennis.
Yeah, tennis. I used to punt tennis a lot. I've taken a little bit of a backseat on it now, just because I try and keep my focus on less sports now. I still have a really enjoy watching tennis, and I always have a punt on the majors. But yeah, it's one of those that I would lend my expertise to judges better than me, to be honest. And keep your eyes peeled, because we might have some tennis coming to oddsnow.com very soon in negotiations on that one. So not to give anything away, but Alas, we'll dive into this week's subject. If you're watching for the first time, after we do the pleasantries for the first 10 minutes, we spend the bulk of the show discussing a specific subject each week. We'd love to hear your suggestions for what subject should be covered in future episodes as well. So if you are watching and you haven't done already, please do give this video a thumb up and leave us a comment with some ideas for what you'd like to see in future episodes. This week, the main topic of conversation is going to be staking plans. It's something that we very minorly touched on, I think, in episode 1, I want to say. And we said, you know what, we'll reserve this conversation for its own episode. And here we are. Episode 3 is all about staking. So there's many, many ways to skin a cat, as we always say when we're talking about gambling. Everybody's got their own approach to staking. Some people like to stake 10p. Some people like to stake 10 grand. Good luck getting on. And everything in the middle. And yeah, there is all manner of ways of doing it. Felix, tell us a little bit about your staking plan. I know you've touched on it a little bit previously and suggested you generally like to stay consistent with your stake.
Yeah, I'll just preface this by anyone who's watching that knows me and my myriad of 10p bets with one particular bookmaker. That isn't all there is to it, I'm afraid to say. But yeah, that's just a fun little thing for anyone who knows me. I do like a lot of smaller bets with one particular provider just to keep them honest. But no, generally my heavier staking tends to come on the exchange, so liquidity plays a part. And for the most part, I am generally an even stakes better, and I think that's because unless I'm quite bad at judging myself what I deem to be something that I should increase or decrease my stakes on. So we'll probably come to touch on Kelly criterion a little bit later on in brief, but unless I'm using something like the Kelly formula, I do like to keep it level, which works particularly well with the high volume approach that I like to take as well. When you're wanting to get a lot of bets down quickly and spread your risk, I think a flat approach works really well, especially if you're in markets that are moving quite quickly. So Saturday from 1 till 3 p.m. if you're betting on the football, horse racing if you're betting, I don't know, 2 hours to the off or anything nearer the time. Outright markets generally very, very small stakes if I'm betting on them at all. But, average bets on a Friday through to Sunday, let's say, generally, unless there's something that I think is an absolute rick, it'll be keep it consistent, keep that turnover grinding over, and try and make the small edges add up over time rather than going in too big too early.
I suppose with a consistent stake as well, I'm imagining, because I don't approach it like that, but I'm imagining that it makes it very easy for you to run assessments on what's working and what's not and cull a lot of rubbish, because I have without I want to stay on your approach first because I'm interested by it, because I don't go at it like that. But yeah, I do see that as an obvious pro that you could very quickly whiz down your spreadsheet and kind of say, okay, all of these aren't working, all of these are working.
Yeah, especially as someone who I religiously track every bet I make. So it'll be the sport, the date, when it was placed, so as in how close to the event it took place. I track closing line value for pretty much every bet I make. There's a few exceptions. The price that I took, the price that I made it at the time. So yeah, when you're tabulating all that data about each bet, it can be quite hard to draw conclusions if you're varying your stakes on all of those. Where with a flat approach, you can very quickly see and build up a sample quite quickly to be able to accurately assess and use like statistical tools to determine whether this is just a lucky run, an unlucky run, or if you've actually onto something in that specific market.
Okay, so I'm going to throw something at you, and you can let me know what you feel about this. But I mean, I'm looking to take some prices just as an example, and I've still got last week's EFL betting show selections in front of me, so they will do nicely. I think myself and Gab Sutton, who you can catch every Friday on the channel, not shameless plug there. We both really fancied Cambridge to beat Crawley at the weekend, and it was quite a big price. Now, there was other picks on that show that I didn't fancy quite as much. So to me, having this sort of approach of I'm just going to put the same on both, that doesn't feel quite right to me. It feels like I should be putting a little bit more on the ones that I fancy more. However, I guess the counter argument to that is that over the long run, some of my red hot fancies will get beat, and some of my ones that I only kind of half fancy will romp home. Is that where you're going?
Sort of. I guess it depends on your appetite for risk, and your confidence.
Quite high, but not as high as it used to be. When I
Yeah.
was single, people who knew me in my early 20s, that was a high appetite of risk.
Yeah, and that definitely plays a part. And I think it's your confidence in your selection. I think, like with that example, with you and Gab both fancying it, then it probably you've got the wisdom of the crowds sort of on your side there. But also,
Glad
I
you
think with
mentioned that. I'm on to that.
yeah, you've got to show when you do the EFO show, you're only putting up 3 bets a week. So I think it makes sense that you would have one of the 3 that you're going to fancy more. And I know a lot of other tipping shows do that. There's generally, if they're putting up 4 or 5 tips a week, there is obviously going to be one that stands out most of them. That's the first they're going to jot down. And I think when it gets to, I don't know, the back end of knockout tournaments, so a Grand Slam or a darts major, yeah, I probably will vary my stake in a little bit more because there's less on the card to choose from. But say when I'm betting a full slate of 20 European leagues on a Saturday, I don't really have that time to, unless I'm doing it algorithmically and I've got a formula that says this is the price you make it, this is the price you've got, you should bet X percentage of your bankroll on this. I generally will stick to those flat percentages of my funds just so I can get the bets down. And like I say, it's that balance between volume and sensitivity to what you're betting on.
Okay, yeah, I hear you. The reason I've flickered between a few different approaches over the years, and the one I've kind of settled on now is a bit of a points-based system. So I will set a stake. Roughly 1% of my bankroll will be 1 point for me. I mean, people do this very, very differently.
I
But
think that's a very good starting point for people who are unsure as well. I think anywhere between 0.5% and 1% of your bankroll is a good starting
so
point.
let's just coin an example here for somebody who wants to take their betting a little bit more seriously. Let's say you have a bankroll initially of £1,000. That might sound like a lot to some people, but the idea is that you're not going to need to top this bankroll up. Ideally, if you're doing it sensibly, this is just going to be a steady build or a steady loss or a maintain, which is probably the most common thing, but can be a bit boring, which probably plays on the entertainment side in some people's heads of, I'll just up my stake now because I'm not getting anywhere, which is, wrong move. But let's say you start with £1,000, that would make a 1 point bet £10 for me, a half point bet £5, and a 2 point bet, something I really fancy, £20. And the reason I like this and I settle on it is because it gives me that bit of wriggle room when I do fancy something a little bit more. I'm probably not as algorithmical as you and data driven. So I do sometimes have picks, for example, the Simon Stevenson pick at the weekend and the 6-0, really, really fancied it. And it was a case of get more on until we can get enough on, because I personally think the bigger you make it an edge and the bigger the opportunity, the more you need to get on. Now, the problem with that could be, and again, it's all dependent on what kind of stuff you're betting on, how you like to bet. I know some guys, I don't know if you ever come across winner odds, Felix, but there's some guys in Spain with a product called winner odds, which basically is pulling out positive expected value selections and suggesting how much you should stake on them when you can input your bankroll, etc. Unfortunately for the guys, it's a great product, but what they haven't factored in is getting on and how quickly your account will be closed, marked, etc. From what I've heard from people using it, but I've seen the product, I've demoed the product. It's a great product, and they're much closer to the Kelly criterion. Now, the fallback of that is early on, you might get something spit out that they think is extremely good value, but it might be a 1 to 4 shot that should be, a couple of decimal points different. Now, are you willing to shell loads of money on a 1 to 4 shot, knowing that if it gets beat, your bankroll is up in smoke? I'm not willing to do that. So I understand the pros of the Kelly criterion. I think if you've got a really big bankroll and you're willing to accept that variance could hit you really hard early on, then that's fine. I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to do something where I could lose 50% of my bankroll in a week because I've had 3 bad beats. Because like most punters, I feel like I get my fair share of bad beats. And it would not surprise me at all if That exact thing happened to me. So, I mean, I was talking to you about the UK Open draw earlier, and I was writing down what the chances were of what Amina getting there. And I said, it's about a 900 to 1 chance that happened to my missus, who couldn't have been less interested, by the way. But, I just wanted to vent. So, yeah, the Kelly criterion, I've touched on it there without explaining exactly what it is. Felix, I don't know if you want to give a little bit more information too. There'll be a lot of laymen here who've never heard of Kelly before, but it is a type of staking system which basically implies what I was talking about earlier, that the bigger the edge, the more you put on, but it does come with some pretty obvious risks.
That's exactly what it is. It is a mathematical equation developed by John Kelly, and it is designed to maximize it. People get this wrong. It's not actually designed to maximize the rate of growth of your bankroll. It's designed to maximize the logarithm of the rate of growth of your bankroll. And I'm not even going to touch on what logarithms are, because unless you've done a maths degree like
my
me,
head, unless you're going to try and dumb that down.
So it's some complex maths that is probably a little bit overly complicated, but essentially it is what you're saying there. It tells you, based on the price you make it and the price that you're being offered, what proportion of your bankroll you should bet. Now, my biggest issue with it is how aggressive it is, and you've touched on that there.
So aggressive, yeah.
So most people recommend scaling it down to either a half or a quarter. I actually bet a tenth of what Kelly would tell me to bet normally. And I think that definitely smooths out the variance that you can get. But the other thing is, you really have to have a good system of knowing what price you make something. And unless you've got, so obviously I am quite a data-driven bettor. If you're more of a handicapper like yourself, I think it's more or less useless, because you're not necessarily putting a price on everything that you bet.
Yeah,
you're more saying,
I can't always quantify the level of edge
you're
I've got.
saying,
Sometimes I just know I've got an edge, and I don't know how
it's
how big
a price
it is.
that's wrong. Yeah, and I think that's a far better. The points based approach makes more sense there. So it definitely has its drawback. And the other thing is, it is quite slow. Like I said, when I want to get a load of volume down, it's much better to flat bet. When I am being more selective, and it's the back end of tournaments, and you really have to be sharp with knowing your prices, I do think it's a very good tool. But like I say, I dial it down for my appetite for risk. The other important thing with what we've not really touched on there, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this as someone who likes to punt a lot of bigger prices, is what you're actually betting on. So the flat approach for me works really well, because I generally bet on a lot of handicaps, so Asian handicaps in football, game handicaps or leg handicaps in tennis and darts, even Asian handicap in snooker they've got now. So you're generally getting close to evens, whichever side you're betting on the coin there. So you're either losing your stake or you're effectively doubling it. So that variance, as long as you're winning 55 to 58% of your bets, you're going to start going up. But you're not going to, a bad run's not going to hit you too bad, because both the growth and the decline is small. Whereas someone like yourself, when you're betting on these bigger shots, I think it's much more important than to various stakes. I don't know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. It's something I've had to toy and play around with over the years as well, and I've kind of settled on a system at the moment that I like, and I'm seeing the benefit of. Because quite simply, I think the flat betting for Asian handicaps and stuff like that, if you're doing the bulk of your betting around even money, flat betting, the same stake again and again, for anyone not familiar with the term, it makes complete sense to me. But for me, so let me just try and give you a contextual example. If I want to back Jermaine Watamina to win a tournament at 80 to 1, but I also make him value to win his match at 5 to 4, I can't use the same point system to do that. So I have to have slightly different point systems for outright betting as I do to match betting, is how I split the two. Now, not everything is that seamless. Not everything slots into it. So snooker, I quite like betting to win the quarter. It's more of an outright, but the prices aren't anywhere near as big as so I had a snooker bet on this morning, for example. I backed Sean Murphy to win his quarter at the World Grand Prix at 7 to 2. Now, that I wanted to have a little bit more on that than what I had on Watamina at 80 to 1. So again, I've had to sort of fiddle with it a little bit, and it's about finding a groove that kind of works for you. I think don't be afraid to tinker with it, but I think when you're giving something a try, when you're trying a new staking system, you need to give it a fair crack. You can't just rip it up after 10 bets. It needs to be, okay, this is how I'm going to do it for a month, or this is how I'm going to do it for 3 tournaments of whatever you're betting on. And then go back, look at it versus your last time and say, have I improved my system here? Like, am I comfortable with it? Do I need to tinker with the stakes a little bit more there? But yeah, largely it is, I have two strands: outright staking plan and a general match-to-match staking plan. And my football match-to-match staking plan is the same as my snooker, is the same as my darts. So I know what a 1 point bet is on a team, on an age and handicap, on a. The only place it slightly falls down is I do quite like doing a bit of prop betting in football. That's probably my preference, because I find the Asian handicap lines quite tough without the data that someone like yourself would have. Like, I get winners, but I struggle to make it really pay. So I'll probably focus a little bit more on props. And that's where, again, I'm starting to think they probably need their own staking plan as well, because they're a very unique type of bet as well. 6-1 on someone to get a yellow card when I make it more of a 4-1 chance. It's not the same as betting on Man United to beat Fulham. Yeah. So again, it's always learning. It's always trying new things. But I do agree. And I think when you bet like I bet, you do have to tailor your approach slightly differently depending on the market that you're actually betting on.
And with your points-based approach, how often will you reassess when you're going to move what a point is up or down? Yeah.
So I've had the same point stake for the last year now.
Okay.
And
very consistent.
Yeah, and I don't really see it changing anytime soon. Just because it's still, I mean, it's really hard. I don't like talking about exact stakes, because I feel like betting is such a broad spectrum. There'll be people that get the same joy of putting a £1 bet on to win a tenner as people do to win thousands and stuff. So I don't like quantifying my exact numbers, but my staking plan is at a point where it's bigger than your man on the street, I would say, but not by a lot, because I've got other priorities in my life now. I've got family, I've got kids, got bills. So it is where it sits in my life currently. You know, there might have been a day when I thought I could conquer the gambling world, and I maybe thought I'd be going a bit harder at this stage of life. And there is the odd bet where I do just have to, I wouldn't really recommend this, but sometimes, having worked in the betting industry for a long time, you become privy to certain pieces of information where it is a case of down tools, get as much as you can on this price is going to move. And that is, not everybody is privy to that. But I suppose every punter at one point in their life will become privy to a bit of information before the market and just think, oh my God, I've got to get as much down as I can, kind of thing. But again, it goes without saying, but you mustn't do that without an exit strategy. I'm doing that because I know I could trade it lower. I'm not letting it run. If it's a good bit of information and I've had well over my staking plan on it, it's with a view to trading it out, because if you let them run, you might get a few nice winners, but in the long run, you'll get burnt fingers. So I think the staking plans, they're essential. If you don't have one already, I think that flat betting is probably a really easy way to go. But equally, if you like to bet on a variety of different sports, maybe consider a points-based system, something like myself. And I would say the fundamentals of the point-based system are your 1 point, 2 points, which is double your stake if you really fancy something, and half your stake if it's a little bit more speculative, and see how you go. And tracking bets is something you've already touched on here. We should really go into this in more detail. I didn't track my bets for a long, long time. I do now. My spreadsheet's it's one I ripped off somebody online. It does a good job. It's far more complex than anything I could create myself. I'm not a sheets whiz, to be honest, and like I imagine you probably are. But just for the purposes of people listening here, if they want to knock up a very basic spreadsheet, I know we spoke about expected closing line value and stuff. That's probably slightly more intermediary level. But if you're just a bettor who thinks, okay, I'm interested to see it, if I'm any good or if I'm losing money, I'm going to start tracking my bets. What is the essential information to have in that sheet?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, mine's definitely grown over time, and it's got all sorts of automated pivot tables and things like that. And that's the beauty of it. As you progress in your betting journey, you can start adding more things to and really diving into the micro aspects of you as a punter and understanding your profile, because you can be sure as hell that the bookmakers you're betting with understand your profile. So if you understand it to the same degree that they do, you're not giving away as much of an advantage. In terms of what needs to be in there, I would say date. So the date of the event, so you can track it over time, obviously. The sport, the two participants, the market that you're betting into. So overs, unders, home team, away team, that kind of thing. The price that you took, and whether it won or lost. And I think if you just do that, you can get away with that. And you can then, it's very easy in Excel to filter by date, to filter by sport, even to filter by participant, and just start to build up a history of which areas you're winning and losing in them.
You talk about building up that history, and a spreadsheet can seem very laborious at first, especially for someone like me who is a little bit more like casual or handicapping, as you say, like not as data driven. I think when you're a data better, it's hand in hand to have a spreadsheet and have several spreadsheets maybe, and be running all kinds of assessments on yourself. Whereas I think more sort of grassroots punters can be a little bit blasé about spreadsheets. Oh, I don't want it to be like homework to fill my spreadsheet in. I just want to have a bet. And I hear that loud and clear. That used to be me. But what I realized is actually when you can, it's so valuable when you can actually see, and you talk about noting down the sport that you bet in. As I say, I used to punt on 7 or 8 different sports. Now I've kind of focused on 3, possibly 4. And it's really, really useful for me to have graphs for each individual sport as well as my overall graph, because if one's running cold, I can go and have a look at why that is. Is it just a bad run? Is it going to turn, or do I think something process based has failed, or has the edge gone, or has something happened that I need to look at here? Am I staking too much on this sport? Shall I reduce it? So there's all that, and I actually have sort of graphs for my outright bets and my single bet as well, and the idea of focusing on outrights and singles in sort of almost equal measure for me is that the single bets are going to be very low variance, and they're going to get a line sort of like this, hopefully going up a little bit, maybe going down a little bit, and just just middling away, just ticking away. And then my outrights, they're going to be very erratic, but a high variance. But I might back 20 losers and then 100 to 1 winner and stuff. And it's really important to be able to track that, because I could go on a losing run with outright bets of 30, 40 bets, and it could be panic stations if you're not tracking it. It's like, oh my God, I've not hit a winner for ages. I really need to hit a winner. And it's like, that's not the mindset to be in. If you're betting outrights, you need to be betting at a staking level where it doesn't matter. You factored in long losing runs. And I talk about 1 point bet here and a half point bet on big prices. If I've got 1% of my bankroll or 0.5% of my bankroll for an outright, that means I could theoretically start my bankroll today and I could back 100 losers before that bankroll goes out. And on the half points at the bigger prices, 200 losers. And my record over the years shows I won't go that length of time. I might go a long time, but I'm not going to go that length of time. And that's where you sort of work out what your stake should be, I think. Do you have any advice for people who don't know what their stake should be? Because I get there's a lot of guys here who they maybe deposit 20 quid in an account, and if they get it up to 100, suddenly they're throwing 30 quid on this, 30 quid on that. Whereas, if they haven't got a pot to urinate in, shall we say, they might be quite content sticking £1 here, 50p here, and they're going based purely on whether they're winning or losing, which obviously is a bad idea.
I think you've got to get inside your own head a little bit, and you've got to work out how much you're comfortable losing. And that can be any value. Like we keep saying, it's personal to you how much you want to bet, how much you want to risk. But have a figure in your head that you thought, if I lost this amount of money, I don't think I'll enjoy betting anymore. And then I would divide that by 100, and that's your 1% of your bankroll can be your starting 1 point stake. So if you're comfortable losing £1,000, then a tenner can be your starting stake. If you're only comfortable losing 50 quid, then 50p can be your starting stake. And you can change that over time. And if you are tracking a spreadsheet, which I get not everyone wants to do, and it's worth saying that with a lot of online bookmakers particularly, you can see your betting history and activity, and it might not divide it down to the granularity that you want, but it's a start. You can take screenshots if you have any good runs. So it's especially good for multiples. You can see how many legs
if you're putting off going to check your accounts, do it. Just do it, because you might be surprised actually how much you've lost or how much you've won. I've spoken to a lot of guys who You know, I asked them to estimate what do you think you are on that account, and they'll estimate it. And I guarantee you, if it's a losing account, they're estimating it less than what the actual loss is.
Yep.
You forget you remember your winners. You don't remember your losers unless they're good losers. I mean, I remember my good losers better than my winners. But most people, they like to tell you, oh, I had this 5-fold one on Saturday, but they won't tell you about the other 6 they had that were nowhere near. And it's human nature, but you do need to go and check these accounts, be really honest with yourself, write it down into a spreadsheet. I've lost this amount betting or whatever, and just work out. That might be the kickstart you need to say, okay, actually, I need to change this here. I need a staking plan.
Yeah, and I've got mine here, and I'll put notes. That's the big column I've had it in the last 6 months is notes on a day where I've done something new. So I've either changed my stakes, I've started betting. So very recently, I've started getting back into NBA player props, which I've not bet for nearly a year. So I've put a note. What date was it here? 22nd of Feb. Back on NBA player props. So I know that if there's some really bad downturns, I can dive into my bet history then and go, oh, actually, maybe I jumped the gun a little bit on those NBA player props there. As it happens, it's gone okay. But I think keeping mental notes to yourself of when you're changing things. And then that also, like you said before, you can see if you put in these notes, how often you're putting a note, and you can make sure you're not changing things too often because you do have to give these things time. Variance does not have to level out after X number of bets. You can go on bad runs and still be making good selections. You do have to give this stuff time to flatten out and let the edge shine through if indeed there is one there.
Yeah, and the main thing I would say as well on that is, like, you know, you're talking about giving them time and the nature of variance. I know somebody that actually tried the winner odds product, and the first bet that they were recommended was a 1.17 chance that they made 1.12, and because there was quite a big difference there, they were recommending quite a large amount of his bankroll went on this, and he just said, well, I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to lose that, risk that amount. And as it happened, the selection lost. But nobody's really wrong there. I mean, if they make that value correctly and it loses, the outcome has nothing to do with whether or not it was a good bet. So there's a very strong chance that both people are right in that situation, but you do have to be realistic with yourself. Am I going to, because I hear this a lot as well, I don't like betting odds on chances. Well, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But odds on chances aren't bad. Odds on can give you some of the best value you can find. If you can find a 1 to 5 shot that should be 1 to 6, that is so good in terms of expected value. But if you don't want to be playing with odds on shots, that's fine. And maybe that is in itself is a sign that you should be a smaller stakes punter, because really you're just looking for a bit of a thrill. You're looking for a bit of a run for your money. You want to back something with the chance of a big click. And again, then you need to factor that in. Okay, I'm chasing the big pot of gold. Again, absolutely fine. I do it on the darts market all the time. I might only hit a few winners a year, handful, but they'll pay for the year. If you're going to do that, you probably want to be going with a lower stake, because you're going to be placing a hell of a lot of losers versus someone like Felix, who's playing around that even money mark. And even if he was putting bad bets on, would probably be winning 40-something% of the time. So it's, you do have to be aware of what kind of bettor you are and where in the market you're playing, and factor that into your staking plan.
Yeah, because there's these people who say, oh, I don't like betting odds on shots, but then they also don't like betting losers. And you've got to be comfortable with one or the other. Like, I think the darts this weekend was a great example. Littler was general 1 to 2 on for the at the semi-final stage to win the whole thing, and I thought that was still a great price. I thought he should have been like 3s on 3 to 10. So like, and then there'll be people going, well, I could bet him to win his 2 match. You'd probably get better value betting him to win outright than you would rolling up the 2 singles anyway at that point. And then, you know, say you bet at James Wade and he gets to the final and loses. Well, I didn't like betting a loser. Well, you've got to get comfortable with one or the other. You've got to find the types of bets that you enjoy putting on. And like you say, for me, that even money mark, I know I'm going to be winning about as much as I lose. I can deal with a bad losing run because I know that a winning run's just around the corner. And that, you know, those kind of markets are literally priced so that they're meant to happen about 50% of the time each. If you can scratch out 53, 54%, you're doing very well.
Exactly that. And it's harder than it sounds. If you're thinking, oh, that sounds quite easy, go try it. But yeah, obviously that gives us a pretty good overview of staking. I think another thing that we haven't really touched on that we should at this point is the presence of hedging within staking, because I touched on it a little bit earlier. Sometimes there's bets where you're privy to a bit of information. You're having a large stake on. Does that mean that you let the large stake run? No. For me, as I say, I like to hedge. I like to hedge positive positions. A great example, a practical example from myself would be if the Players' Championship darts, I get my bets on with a firm that are paying quarter odds for the first four. So if you play against the semi-finals, you've got a quarter odds winner. That's a really important part of my strategy for Players' Championships because I'm betting big prices. So getting like a 250 to 1 place up is better than backing a winner at the top of the market. However, there does come a stage where if one of my 250 to 1 runners or whatever is in the quarterfinals or the last 16, I need to start looking at the match betting to make sure that I, at a bare minimum from my perspective, if I can make sure that I don't lose money on it, you do it. Like if there's a chance where I'm 2 wins away from a big win, I'll maybe hedge it for my stake back. So for example, if I'd had, I don't know, £20 on someone total stake, and they were in the quarterfinal, I would make sure I'm winning £20 on their opponent so that I could get, I could scratch that as a void almost, or a no money loss kind of thing, and I'll still leave it running for a big amount. There might be times as well where I think actually I don't fancy him to win this game, so I'm going to hedge even more aggressively. I'm going to make it that so that his opponent is quite a decent winner for me, and I'll have 2 winners, obviously reducing my stake. But hedging, I don't think it's done that much by recreational bettors. We've touched on cash out a little bit. Generally a very negative experience using a cash out function, but that is, for anyone that doesn't know, when you cash out a bet, you are hedging. You're just hedging in quite an inefficient way.
Yeah, obviously we touched on hedging anti-post stuff last week, and it can be different. It obviously depends on your time commitments to your betting as well. Obviously, if you've got stuff that's going on at 3 o'clock on a Saturday and you're out doing whatever you like to do on a Saturday afternoon, shopping or out for lunch or whatever, you're not necessarily going to be in a position where you can hedge all of your in-play bets. But certainly if it's, I don't know, the 4 o'clock Premier League game on a Sunday and you've had a few bets on that, and yeah, the first half's gone pretty well for you. You've won a couple of first half bets and some of your bets for the 90 minutes are looking good, then there's definitely a chance, especially if you're in for a decent payout, you may as well start to look for some options to hedge, lock yourself a little bit of profit in. Don't go crazy. Don't completely lose all the risk because you put that bet on in the first place because you think it's a good value bet. But certainly in those bigger events that you're going to be watching or attending or participating in, there's so much left on the table in terms of hedging, and I think that's why bookmakers do aggressively promote the cash out so often, because they don't want people to get sharper and trade their positions in more efficient manner.
Practical example of this as well. Last week, I touched on it. I had Joe Yulong to win his quarter in the snooker. He was 4-2 up on John Higgins, and that was a time for me to hedge when he was 4-2 up in a race to 5 against, as a dog, that it made sense for me to have a cover and make sure that I wasn't going to lose if the game, if he failed to get over the line, which he did. And then instead of that being a loser in my spreadsheet that I look at and think, oh, that was unlucky, it's a positive result in my spreadsheet. It's nowhere near as positive as I wanted it to be. But these incremental gains over a long period, we're talking about sample sizes and giving everything a chance. I promise you, if you can hedge your way out of good positions, it's going to favour you in the long run. Yes, you might have to swallow a couple. But what's the worst that can happen, really? I always think if you hedge, you're winning. You're winning one way or the other. You're maybe not winning as much as you want, but I would rather be left with a bitter taste in my mouth, having got my stake back and a little bit of profit because I could have had more, than the alternative, which is sat on a loser that you know you should have made money out of. It was a good bet. It got very close to copping. You didn't hedge it, and it's worth sweet F all. So really, I do think if you're not hedging your bets, you are losing. You're leaving cash on the table, as you say there, and the cash out function that I touch on. We've mentioned it already. There's an overround built into there for the bookie where it's in the long run they're going to make huge amounts of money from cash out punters. You can almost always cover yourself better by laying on the exchange or back in top price with a rival firm. So just get yourself familiar with the process of hedging. Have a little go on your next football bet that you do. Just think, right, how would I hedge this now if I wanted to? Explore the different ways of doing it. Like I always say, there's many different ways to skin a cat. And just add it to your arsenal. It will save you money in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about that process of evolving as a better and finding ways to um, improve not just the bets you make, but the approach you take to making them and making money and seeing it not just as a throw your money on the table and see what happens. Almost like I said right back at the beginning of the first episode, it's almost a little bit like trading a stock. And the movement of the stock up and down is your team or player's performance within the match or the tournament that you're betting on them in. And there's going to be positions where, yes, okay, occasionally massive comebacks happen. If you'd have backed Newcastle at 4-0 down at half time against Arsenal when they came back and drew 4-all, well done to you. That's going to happen much less often than even you'd imagine in terms of how many times that's happened in the whole history of top division football in England. So I think it's about making the decision. And again, I don't want to feel like I'm repeating myself, but managing your own level of risk, managing how much you want to lose, how much you want to invest into your bankroll, and making decisions based on the still in play, the probability that you make it. If there's still a good price on the table, maybe dip in again and maybe hedge a little bit out later on. Use your knowledge of the sport if you're watching it to understand um, the momentum of the game in question and see if you actually think it has been mispriced in play. But all the time in the back of your mind, have that thought that let's try and chip away here. I think that is the key. It's not about these big. It's not going to a casino and playing roulette. It's much more akin to blackjack. It's about chipping away, card counting, and trying to get that little bit back with every bet you make.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think there was some good points made there. Let us know your thoughts, obviously, as well below. I'd love to hear what staking plans other people are using. If you're comfortable sharing the amount that you stake on each bet, and whether you've changed that over the years. I guess a last question for me, Felix, would be if you're having the presence of good and bad runs. And in relation to your staking plan, if you're having a particularly good run, when is the right time to raise your stake? And on the flip side of that, if you're having a bad time of things, do you need to lower your stake? Because obviously, is there a percentage of your bankroll where you would start to panic, for example? Or equally, if you've flipped it over a couple of times, is it time to go a bit harder?
Yeah, that's one of the problems with Kelly is that when you have a bad run, it suddenly goes, "Oh, you're good. Let's whack a load more on." When actually you don't want to do that. And again, that's why I think scaling Kelly down is so important. I would say it depends how often you're betting, but as a general rule, like every 50 to 100 bets, reassess where you're at, reassess if you want to up or down your stakes or want to increase the percentage of your bankroll, or even say at the beginning, this is my bankroll at the beginning of the month, so I'm going to bet this percentage of what it was at the beginning of the month, and then see where you're at the start of the next month. So say you're betting 2% of what it was on the 1st of March 2 days ago. Then you get to the 1st of April, right? It's this now. I'm going to bet 2% of whatever it is now for the rest of the month. I think that could be quite a strategic approach. And it means you're not fiddling around with calculating your percentage each time you're looking at it. So a decent size, but enough that you're churning it over enough.
Yeah, and I think the key takeaway there is just giving it time and making your decisions, assessing over a large sample size. Do not reduce stakes after a bad week. If you're having to reduce stakes after a bad week, your stakes are too high, quite simply. And on the same flip side of that, if you're increasing your stakes because you've had a good week, you're doing it wrong, and it's going to bite you on the backside soon, because good weeks are very often followed by bad weeks, and they can be followed by several bad weeks, as I'm sure many viewers can attest to. But it's tempting, isn't it? And it's an old age question of do you increase your stakes when you're on a good run and chase the dream and stuff? But I think it's getting out of that mindset of chasing the big pot of gold and actually just, without sounding like BTEC Mikel Arteta, just trust the process and just know where you're going, know that it's working, refine it when it's not working, and see it as a long game. And if you're making a few quid, ultimately you're winning, aren't you?
Yeah, you quoted Arteta. I was going to quote Neil Warnock. Enjoy it, but be disciplined while you're doing it.
That's a better quote, yeah. That's far better. I prefer Warnock over Arteta in this house. I can guarantee you that. Well, that's fantastic. That rounds off our conversations on staking plans. We do just like to finish the last 10 minutes of our shows by discussing a viewer question, and we actually had 2 in this week, which is a record based off we had 1 on the first week, 2 on the second week. So we're aiming for 3 this week. Can we keep that going? Probably an unsustainable ratio, I'm going to say, but really appreciate people getting in touch.
Stranger things have happened.
Yes, they have, and we can always make some burner accounts if needed as well. But we'll start with Owen's question. Owen Doyle, thanks for listening, Owen, and thanks for getting in touch. Really appreciate it. He said, as you spoke near the end, maybe an episode on Trixie's, Lucky 15s, etc. would be interesting. I don't really sway from singles or the odd double, so I'd love to hear about the pros and cons. Well, I can tell you, Owen, that actually we are going to do an episode on that based off your suggestion. So just for the purposes of other viewers, you make a suggestion, it does get listened to. It's not like your local MP. We act on our suggestions here. So I'll make sure that in the coming month or so, we have a full episode dedicated to alternative types of bets. But in terms of what bets I use, I won't give too much away because I don't want to ruin the episode, but I feel like there's certain types of bets quite heavily promoted by the industry, which have the odds stacked against the punter, and probably you can find more cost-effective ways of spending your money. But I do think there are some fancy multiple bets which, when played correctly with the correct type of selections, can be worth adding to your arsenal and can be quite lucrative. But it has to be done right, and I think that is a general message that I would give to people with the betting industry. When you see boosted prices like we talked about last week, when you see promotions being dangled in front of your face that look too good to be true, ask yourself why they are being dangled. Are they just looking to retain business? Are they looking to attract new custom? Is it a genuine loss leader hoping that you're going to waste your money on other things? Because that does happen. Some of these things, they are worth taking advantage of. But generally, I mean, Lucky 15s are the one that spring to my mind. Every shop in the country will ram a Lucky 15 down your throat. The reality of it is, if you just play Lucky 15s every day, you might have a fun time. You're probably not going to win money. And when you do click one, you're not going to win the amount that you would by applying that knowledge and that strategy more effectively. But on the flip side, as I say, there are some other things like Trixie's is a bet I place very often on certain types of selections. But we'll save that one for the show in question, which will probably air at some point at the back end of March, I would say. So thanks for getting in touch there, Owen. I will deflect the other one to you, Felix. As I say, we've got 2 from last week's show. And this is from Value Hunter. Thanks for watching. Value Hunter, great name as well. Hi, guys. Enjoyed the podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts on accounts being shut down without good reasons, such as closing you because they don't like the type of bet you place. Something needs to be done for me. And it goes on to say that arbing is one thing, but picking and choosing who to lay bets to shouldn't be allowed. I think that's something we can all kind of get behind.
Yeah, it's a mess, and I don't think anyone's quite got the right answer at the minute. But I think the general consensus from people I speak to in the industry and people whose opinions I value on X or Twitter is that there needs to be more transparency. That's if people know why their account's being shut down, and you can tell them what rules in the T's and C's that they've broken by winning bets by knowing more about the sport than your traders, then fair enough. But if they're just putting on good bets and winning and you don't like it because they're better at pricing the event than you are, don't go into the business of bookmaking. Like, you're in that business. I know it's a business at the end of the day, but there's so many people that fall for these promotions, like we said, that you've got to take the rough with the smooth, like you do in any business. And look, there's never going to be a right or wrong answer to this question about how we can sustain good punters accounts, but certainly the amount you're allowed to win seems to be getting smaller and smaller with each passing year. All it's done, and I was going to touch on this when we talked about the exchange, but it's just led the really, really sharp punters onto the exchanges now, and it just makes it harder for your average man. The exchange is pitted as better against better. Now it's better against syndicate, and I don't know quite how we fix that imbalance.
It is, and better against bot and better against and without opening a can of worms here, again, this is maybe one that needs its own episode, but the black market is becoming more and more prominent in conversation, and it's not hard to see why when people are getting shut down for honest practice. Now, there are a lot of arbors and stuff, and I have to sit there and be honest with myself and say, if I'm a bookmaker and I've got one customer that's just winning thousands off me every month consistently, do I want their business? Probably not. It's probably frustrating me, but like you say, these businesses are swallowing up thousands and thousands of mug punters, gambling addicts, and people with genuine problems, and they don't seem to have a single issue taking their money from them unless they get called out or pulled up by a regulatory authority, of which is seriously lacking in the betting industry at the moment. But I think it just summed it up. My missus takes a very fleeting interest in my gambling, other than are you winning or losing, and have we won enough to go on holiday or something along those lines. But she says to me when I talk about not getting paid and stuff, she said, I don't understand how they can not pay you out when you win a bet, and little things that to a man that doesn't bet, a man or woman that doesn't bet, it would just be baffling to try and explain to. Oh yeah, so I deposit as much as I want. Nobody says anything. I lose loads of money. Nobody says anything. But as soon as I have a winner, I have to send in my driving license, my passport, 3 months utility bills. I have to recite the can in front of them on video just to get my money. It's absolutely bonkers. And that side of it, I definitely think can be addressed. We definitely need better regulation, and there needs to be better understanding from the government. Obviously, we have all this stuff going on with the white paper still rolling on in the background. There's been a change of governments there, which has impacted the implementation of a lot of things. But we've seen soft checks come in the last couple of weeks for accounts, and it's a continuing trend, isn't it, of it being harder to win, harder to get bets on, but still easy to lose your money if you're a bit of a mug. And that can't be right. So I do agree with you, Value Hunter, that something must be done to address some of the charlatan behaviour going on in the bookmaking world. And if you are a genuine winner, then I think fair play to you. And I think maybe bookmakers would be better served by trying to learn off the genuine winners, look at where they're winning and work out, can we get as good as them? You have all these resources, all these computers, you can get all these quants in to do your numbers. Surely you can shut these edges down if they're sharp enough. And like I said, why don't spend some of the money that you're happily taking off mug punters all year long and improve your algorithms a little bit? That would be my 2
points. This is what I'm going to say. Pinnacle have made a 25-year career as one of the best books in the industry.
Yeah.
They treat it as the people who are winning off them, they're paying those people for their expertise in those sports.
So and it goes on in all sorts of places, laying bettors that are going to lose your money because you want the information.
Yeah, and all that lets you sharpen your line. Say it's a football bettor who's betting on a Thursday morning. Yeah, okay, you're going to have to pay him out a fair bit, but you're going to make that back. I don't want to guess how many fold on people that at 2:30 on a Saturday have gone, oh, that's a nice price. And they have no idea that the price has moved.
Let's say Mr. Bloom or Mr. Benham comes in and wants 6 figures down. Now, they're basically doing your work for you. And I totally agree with you. It makes sense for them to take that bet off somebody that they know is sharp and save themselves the thousands by lowering the price and go bottom price so you don't have to take any more, because clearly you've got it wrong. And I notice it a lot on Odds Checker where somebody goes from top price to bottom price on the marketplace on a selection very quickly. And that's, to me, how it should be, because you've put the wrong price up, you've took your medicine, and you've had to chop it, and you don't want to take any more. And that's fine. Adjust your prices by all means, but you have to lay the bet. Your job as a bookmaker is to lay bets, not laying bets because you don't want to. It's scandalous.
Yeah. I do get it's hard these days with the rise of the social media tipster.
Yes.
And you're just getting people following in, and you're not always getting people who are following their own opinion. They're either following someone who's posted a tweet
on. They're crushing a price and huge liabilities.
Yeah, and I completely get that side of it. And there could probably be some work done around that with the automation side of it, where even flagging some of these accounts that are posting these tips. Right, it's been flagged. Let's lay the first 100 bets, and then we'll move the price or whatever. But
fine, that would suit me.
Yeah, just transparency for me. Be transparent about you're a bookmaker. Your job is to take these bets off us. If you want to move the price, fine. Even if you want to restrict people, that's fine, because I get that the liability side can be quite difficult.
Yeah, restrictions
especially
I don't
when
have a problem with as long as they're reasonable restrictions.
Yeah.
10p, I mean, come on. You might as well just shut
Yeah.
the account and say we're scared to take a bet off you. That's what
Yeah.
it is in truth. But look, this probably deserves its own episode as well. We are creeping towards that golden hour. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Hope you really enjoyed listening along to the podcast. Do drop your comments below for questions for next week's episode and topic suggestions. We will warmly receive them. I hope you have a good week punting. Felix, thanks very much for joining me. We'll be back again next Monday. Have a good week. Be lucky, and we'll see you very soon. As I pull up Gillingham to beat Morecambe for no apparent reason, but at least it won. And I'll leave that up as I do the outro there.